new regions, new fragments of earth or drain or masonry, sudden caught by a jet of disruptive force, might come flying by the explorer's head, or the ground yawn a fiery grave beneath his feet. Few who had ventured into these areas of destruction and survived attempted any repetition of their experiences. There are stories of puffs of luminous, radioactive vapor drifting sometimes scores of miles from the bomb center and killing and scorching all they overtook. At first the conflagrations from the Paris center spread westward halfway to the sea. Moreover, the air in this infernal inner circle of red-lit ruins had a peculiar dryness and a blistering quality, so that it set up a soreness of the skin and lungs that was very difficult to heal. Such was the last state of Paris, and such on a larger scale was the condition of affairs in Chicago, and the same fate had overtaken Berlin, Moscow, Tokyo, the eastern half of London, Toulon, Kiel, and 218 other centers of population or armament. Each was a flaming center of radiant destruction that only time could quench, that indeed in many instances time has still to quench. To this day, though indeed with a constantly diminishing uproar and vigor, these explosions continue. In the map of nearly every country of the world, 3 or 4 or more red circles, a score of miles in diameter, mark the position of the dying atomic bombs and the death areas that men have been forced to abandon around them. Within these are perished museums, cathedrals, palaces, libraries, galleries of masterpieces, and a vast accumulation of human achievement, whose charred remains lie buried, a legacy of curious material that only future generations may hope to examine. Section 4. The state of mind of the dispossessed urban population which swarmed and perished so abundantly over the countryside during the dark days of the autumnal months that followed the last war, was one of blank despair. Barnet gives sketch after sketch of groups of these people, cramped among the vineyards of Champagne, as he saw them during his period of service with the army of pacification. There was, for example, that man milliner who came out from a field beside the road that rises up eastward out of Epernay, and asked how things were going in Paris. He was, says Barnet, a round-faced man, dressed very neatly in black, so neatly that it was amazing to discover he was living close at hand in a tent made of carpets, and he had an urbane but insistent manner, a carefully trimmed mustache and beard, expressive eyebrows, and hair very neatly brushed. "No one goes into Paris," said Barnet. "But, monsieur, that is very unenterprising," the man by the wayside submitted. "The danger is too great. The radiations eat into people's skins." The eyebrows protested. "But is nothing to be done?" "Nothing can be done." "But, monsieur, it is extraordinarily inconvenient, this living in exile and waiting. My wife and little boy suffer extremely, there is a lack of amenity, and the season advances. I say nothing of the expense and difficulty in obtaining provisions. When does monsieur think that something will be done to render Paris possible?" Barnet considered his interlocutor. "I'm told," said Barnet, "that Paris is not likely to be possible again for several generations." "Oh, but this is preposterous! Consider, monsieur, what are people like ourselves to do in the meanwhile? I am a costumer. All my connections and interests, above all my style, demand Paris." Barnet considered the sky, from which a light rain was beginning to fall, the wide fields about them from which the harvest had been taken, the trim poplars by the wayside. "Naturally," he agreed, "you want to go to Paris, but Paris is over." "Over!" "Finished." "But then, monsieur, what is to become of me?" Barney turned his face westward, whither the white road led. "Where else, for example, may I hope to find opportunity?" Barney made no reply. "Perhaps on the Riviera, or at some such place as Hamburg, or some plague perhaps." "All that," said Barney, accepting for the first time facts that had lain evident in his mind for weeks, "all that must be over too." There was a pause. Then the voice beside him broke out. "But, monsieur, it is impossible. It leaves nothing." "No, not very much." "One cannot suddenly begin to grow potatoes." "It would be good if monsieur could bring himself to the life of a peasant, and my wife, you do not know the distinguished delicacy of my wife, a refined helplessness, a peculiar dependent charm, like some slender tropical creeper, with great white flowers. But all this is foolish talk. It is impossible that Paris, which has survived so many misfortunes, should not presently revive." "I do not think it will ever revive. Paris is finished. London too, I am told. Berlin. All the great capitals were stricken." "But monsieur must permit me to differ." "It is so." "It is impossible. Civilizations do not end in this manner. Mankind will insist." "On Paris?" "On Paris." "Monsieur, you might as well hope to go down the Maelstrom, and resume business there." "I am content, monsieur, with my own fate." "The winter comes on. Would not monsieur be wiser to seek a house?" "Farther from Paris? No, monsieur. But it is not possible, monsieur, what you say, and you are under a tremendous mistake. Indeed you are in error. I ask merely for information." "When I last saw him," said Barney, "he was standing under the signpost at the crest of the hill, gazing wistfully, yet it seemed to me a little doubtfully, now towards Paris, and altogether heedless of a drizzling rain that was wetting him through and through." Section 5. This effect of chill dismay, of a doom as yet imperfectly apprehended, deepens as Barney's record passes on to tell of the approach of winter. It was too much for the great mass of those unwilling and incompetent nomads to realize that an age had ended, that the old help and guidance existed no longer, that times would not mend again, however patiently they held out. They were still in many cases looking to Paris when the first snowflakes of that pitiless January came swirling about them. The story grows grimmer. If it is less monstrously tragic after Barney's return to England, it is, if anything, harder. England was a spectacle of fear-embittered householders hiding food, crushing out robbery, driving the starving wanderers from every faltering place upon the roads, lest they should die inconveniently and reproachfully on the doorsteps of those who had failed to urge them onward. The remnants of the British troops left France finally in March, after urgent representations from the provisional government at Orleans thought they could be supported no longer. They seem to have been a fairly well-behaved, but highly parasitic force throughout, though Barney is clearly of opinion that they did much to suppress sporadic brigandage and maintain social order. He came home to a famine-stricken country, and his picture of the England of that spring is one of miserable patience